UK e-bike laws are ridiculous. I know the majority of you who watch my channel are going to agree with me. It's a subject that comes up time and time again frequently. I know there's going to be a few people that disagree with me, but hear me out. Guys have always done dumb shit. It's just who we are. If it isn't for electric bikes in this day and age, back in our childhood we was doing sketchy stuff on BMX bikes, skateboards, you name it. Probably going back millions of years, we was doing dumb shit with dinosaurs and jumping off cliffs, and in my opinion this is something that can never be changed about some of us men, and never should be. Especially in a world where we're controlled by so much of what we do and so much of our freedom is being taken away from us. In my opinion, this is something that should never be programmed out of us and never should be. In a world where we're controlled more and more every day in the things we do, cycling is and always has been and always should be about freedom. Now obviously the boundaries between what is cycling and what isn't cycling with e-bikes now is highly debatable, and that is what we're going to go into today. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not fully against some sort of compliance with e-bikes. I just don't agree fully with the current law, and I don't think it was written by people who are experts in e-bikes or even understand about them fully. I don't think you should have 14-year-old, 13-year-old lads flying about on 6,000 watt Surons on the back wheel down High Street. Obviously I know there needs to be some kind of law to prevent someone having accidents. On the other hand, you can't always prevent accidents because it's always happened on normal bicycles, by pedestrians, etc, etc. So you can't entirely blame e-bikes for accidents. Like I said, guys have always done dumb shit, so you know we're accident prone by nature. I do think the law's blurred slightly to benefit those in higher power. I'm not going to get into the political side of things, but I do think they are somewhat preventing what could be a safe, acceptable limit for e-bikes. However, a lot of wealthy people and corporations are going to be losing money if this becomes too attractive for people to use as a mode of transport that they can't tax. So we're going to dive straight into the Gov UK website on e-bike law and go through it together, and we're going to open this discussion about current UK e-bike law. Right, so kicking off at the top of the page on the UK Gov website for e-bike law is: you can ride an electric bike if you're 14 or over, as long as it meets certain requirements. Now, I agree it's not a terrible idea to have a certain age limit, because for the majority of us adults that have had experience of riding bikes, there is going to be a small minority of people where they may have, you know, inexperience for whatever reason on any type of bikes, and you can't, I agree, just let someone go on anything, any power. So to some degree I think, yeah, maybe there should be a minimum age for electric bikes. I'm somewhat in agreement with this, but then there's also this grey area where it's like, well, what about children's toys? You know, you get these little electric cars, you get little tiny little electric motorcycles that do barely walking pace. So you telling us that they're illegal because there's millions of them in the world? Is there a separate law for you know, maybe this is because the page is obviously e-bike law, maybe there's a separate law for children's electric toys. So I don't think the guidelines is that clear on that. Someone tell me in the comments if there's a law regarding electric toys, because that's a bit of a grey area as far as I'm concerned. These electric bikes are known as electric assisted pedal cycles, EAPCs. You do not need a license to ride one, and it does not need to be registered, taxed or insured. Alright, a little bit of a thumbs up, some bit of freedom there I guess. But it's more about the actual guidelines I'm delving into today. Everyone's going to have their own opinion, but these are mine. I've got a fair amount of experience with electric bikes. I've built absolutely loads of them. Most of you who watch my channel will know I review a lot of bikes. I do DIY e-bikes, I do off-road e-bikes, I do everything in between, from crazy to fairly run-of-the-mill daily stuff. So, you know, I don't think anyone can term themselves a professional, but I would say I'm highly experienced in e-bikes, and I don't believe the way these rules are written doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because, well, you'll see as I get into it anyway. What counts as an EAPC? An EAPC must have pedals that can be used to propel it. It must show either the power output, the manufacturer of the motor. It must also show either the battery voltage and the maximum speed of the bike. Yeah, but then, as a lot of people do, what's stopping someone going on eBay and buying a 250 watt sticker with whatever marking on it, you know? It doesn't really mean a lot. The electric motor must have a maximum power output of 250 watts. Anyone with half a clue about e-bikes know that the power rating in wattage of an electric motor, be it hub motor or mid-drive motor or whatever configuration, means very little. For example, on a hub drive you can have internal gears which could vastly change the characteristics of the motor. Rather than having one long drawn out gear, you can have faster acceleration, more top end speed. Likewise on a mid-drive, it puts the power from the pedals through to the back wheel, so you can drastically change the gearing for more low down power or top end speed. So yeah, just 250 watts on its own doesn't mean very much. Car manufacturers, for example, they can make exactly the same car in their production unit, and then for environmental factors, weather factors, factors to do the law, they can detune exactly the same vehicle to suit a certain country. E-bike manufacturers are no different. They're not going to make a 100 watt, a 250 watt, a 500 watt, a 1000 watt version of the same bike. They're just going to mass produce a 500 watt, a 750 watt, a 1000 watt. Whatever the bike is, they're going to have a few models, but they're going to detune it. If it needs to come in the UK as the current 250 watt regulation, they're doing it by the millions. They're sending out, you know, this is not a complaint by me, it's just what it is. They're sending out 750 watt e-bikes and it's just being limited by the speed controller. And then again, it can be hacked, unlocked, de-restricted to do the original intended speed, obviously for off-road use. And don't even get me started on the UK Gov wording of a maximum power or maximum peak power of 250 watts. Even if you had an actual 250 watt motor and battery and controller, it's still going to put out more than 250 watts. I don't think the people that wrote the law understand clearly the nature of e-bikes. They don't just have a continuous flat line of a certain wattage. When you initially pull away on the bike, it's going to have a massive spike of wattage to get the weight and to get the momentum going off the line. It's never a set number. It's very hard to dictate some rules on wattage when wattage is such a fluctuating amount. Even on the most lowest powered e-bikes, they're still going to peak well above 250 watts, say 500 watts, 700 watts, even on low power bikes. If you generally had a bike that couldn't peak above 250 watts, then it would probably have to be 100 watts to begin with. So it makes absolutely zero sense saying a maximum power of 250, because you can go and get any e-bike, and if it's got the wattage meter on the display, it will peak above 250. So for that reason, I think it's ridiculous. Right, next on the Gov UK website, it says, should not be able to propel the bike when it's travelling more than 15.5 miles per hour. Well, the only way you're going to do that is electronically limiting it, because as many people argue, you can pedal much quicker than 15.5 miles an hour. Probably my nan, if she was still alive, can pedal more than 15 miles an hour. It's not hard to do, but we'll get into speed in a moment. My main gripe with this is the motor has little to no bearing on the top speed. I can make a 5,000 watt motor make a bike travel at a maximum 10 miles an hour. I could grab a 250 watt motor like I have done on the channel and make it achieve 1500 watts. You can overpower and overvolt a motor quite easily to go quicker than it does. Most of the time it will do this perfectly safely unless you go completely over the top like I did, and I stuck 9,000 watts for a 1000 watt motor and it burnt out the phase cables. But with a few modifications and a bit more patience than me, you could quite easily put a ludicrous amount of power for a motor if you just upgraded a few components. So motor size means literally nothing. So they can say 250 watt motor, you don't know what's on it, you can put any sticker you want on it. I don't think it's a good way to do it. I could easily make a several thousand watt e-bike from a 250 watt motor that looks completely legal. And another thing, it doesn't make any sense because electric bikes include everything: tricycles, cargo bikes, chopper bikes, big long heavy bikes. 250 watts is not going to be safe or enough power to even get a heavy bike. You know, that could include tandems and all sorts. It's not going to get a heavy bike off the line safely. It's not going to power up hills safely. It's not going to let you manoeuvre with a certain amount of power, even under 15 miles an hour. So again, I don't think 250 watts makes any sense at all. Power is somewhat irrelevant. An EAPC can have more than two wheels, for example a tricycle. Right, okay, fair enough. Not going to contest that. If anyone has got a quadricycle, I'd love to make one of electric. If anyone wants to shoot me an email if you've got one for sale or you want to donate to the channel for a project. Where can you ride? If a bike meets the EAPC requirements, it's classed as a normal pedal bike. This means you can ride it on cycle paths and anywhere else pedal bikes are allowed. And then it says other kinds of electric bikes. Any electric bike that doesn't meet the EAPC rules is classed as a motorcycle or moped and needs to be registered and taxed. You will need a driving licence to ride one. You must wear a crash helmet. You know, I think that's ridiculous. You could have a 250 watt legal powered e-bike with a twist and go throttle that's not very fast, helps out an old person or whatever, and it's completely illegal just because you use a throttle as well as pedalling. Then you could have 500 watt cargo bike that does 12 miles an hour and pedal assist, and that's illegal. So that makes no sense to me, because what difference does it make? It's going to perform no differently to another e-bike with either pedal assist and no throttle, or an e-bike that's 250 watt that's actually faster. So again, I don't think the law kind of has common sense. Now let's go on to the most discussed subject that I see come up regarding UK e-bike law: speed. The UK law, as we mentioned earlier, is set to 15.5 mile an hour for e-bikes. Most people know that quite easily you can pedal and sustain more than 15 miles an hour. The majority of people can. I did a little research before making this video and I found a website, Road Bike UK, which is a website for all kinds of info on, for, you know, normal pedal cyclists without electric, and they had an article on average speed of cyclists without electric. I'm just going to quickly go over what it says on that website. Here are some general guidelines for all solo riders on general mixed terrain, i.e. rolling hills about 30% of the time and pretty much flat the rest of the time. So beginners, by short distance, like we're talking about 10 to 15 miles, absolute beginners, an average speed of 12 miles an hour. Most cyclists can achieve 10 to 12 miles an hour average very quickly with limited training. Now that's 10 to 12 as an absolute beginner, and that's an average, so they're going to be going a lot faster than 12 as an absolute beginner. Reasonable experience, medium cyclists will travel say about 40 miles, averaging a speed of 16 to 19 miles an hour. Again, obviously there's going to be peaks and moments where they're going down hills, or cycling varies on the terrain, hills, winds, so there's going to be moments where they're doing over 20 mile an hour if they've got an average of 16 to 19. Quite competent club riders, someone I'm training regularly, medium distances, say 50 or 60 miles, they are going to be travelling an average of 20 to 24 miles per hour. Now, again, they're going to be peaking at possibly 30 miles an hour or more. Anyone that sees, you know, I live near Southend-on-Sea, quite often on a weekend I'll be sitting outside Costa or CAF and see road cyclists travelling all the way down from London, sort of good 20-30 miles, and they're easily doing 30 miles an hour. Well, yeah, we are talking seasoned cyclists, but you know, an average rider in general is going to be sustaining more than 15 miles an hour, you know, the majority of the time. Another subject which I want to touch on, it isn't mentioned, I find this a bit strange, but it isn't, well, it kind of is mentioned, but it's not mentioned in any detail, it's on a separate page, is e-bike throttles. It does say later on in the e-bike rules page about twist and go other types of motorcycles and pedal assist, but there's a separate page for throttle law, and this is what it states. You can have a throttle on a bike bought in 2016 and later if it assists the rider without pedalling at a maximum speed of 6 kilometers an hour, which is 3.7 miles per hour. These twist and go throttles are designed to help people who have difficulty starting due to injury or disability. In my opinion, throttles were not designed exclusively for this reason. Throttles were designed, and have always been around, to give a rider the competent ability to employ a given amount of throttle of their choice and power. Typically, most pedal assists that are not torque assist will just give 100% power. You have no variability whatsoever. You know, I can't see the difference whether you power the bike by scratching your head, you know, blowing your nose, farting, whatever. What method of putting the power on matters. You know, you get disabled vehicles for people, you know, adapted for people with missing limbs and have different controls. They're deemed safe, so why does it matter what throttle you use? You know, whether you're using a different body part, you know. as long as it can achieve the power, how does it matter how you trigger the power of the vehicle? I don't see how it matters. My argument is that on cheap pedal assists, sometimes they don't have a throttle because of the law, and you'll go through a little wooden gate in the woods, take a little tight bend in an alleyway, and it will just, you pedal a little bit to go slow, turn in tight on a slow bend, and it'll lurch forward, throw you off, skid the front wheel out, and they're completely dangerous. If you've got a throttle, you can graduate the throttle like you would on a moped, completely safer. And as someone who rides motorbikes and all kinds of vehicles, safety is the most paramount thing about riding bikes. If you can have better control, you're a safer rider, and throttles, in my opinion, should be allowed regardless because they give you more control, end of. You know, it doesn't matter whether you can get 15 miles an hour by twisting a throttle or pedalling, you have got more control of that vehicle from having the graduation of the throttle. You still get exactly the same power as you would as pedalling, but you also got the option of having less power. Not only that, if you're pulling away from a set of, you know, you're pulling onto a junction, onto a road, on a crossing where you've got a green light, the ability to pull away effectively and quickly, whether you're disabled or able-bodied, the ability to twist the throttle instead of having to get your leg up and push away before a car comes between a gap. In my opinion, it's a hell of a lot safer if you've got a throttle. Personally, the only reason I think they are not letting us have e-bike throttles is because if e-bikes become too attractive for people, they will ditch their cars, and a lot of rich people are going to start losing money on fuel and taxes, you know, having their grubby little hands in the pie of everything we do in life. Personally myself, I don't have an absolute guideline of what I think the law should be, but those are the things that I, you know, don't agree with and the reasons for not agreeing with it. Let me know in the comments what you think and your thoughts on that. As a very basic guideline, I think the UK law should be something along these lines. I think the 250 watt motor law should be increased to around 750, 1000 watts. Several reasons for that. Motor size has little bearing on the speed of the bike. You might have a tandem bike, you might have a heavy cargo bike that doesn't go very fast. You need the ability to pull away with a little bit more power sometimes to remain safe in traffic. You need the ability to go up hills. There's many factors. I don't think it hurts, and it would make a lot more sense to raise the motor size to 750 or 1000 watt. It gives a lot more scope for heavier vehicles, and, you know, not even talking about top speed, because there's a lot of things that can be done much safer at lower speeds if you've got a bit more power. I do agree that there should be a minimum age for riding an e-bike, because honestly, for the majority of my mates that are all grown up and got experience riding bikes, yeah, we probably don't need it. But as a father with a teenage son, I've got a limitless amount of e-bikes turning over, and I don't just let him, a lot of it comes down to common sense, I don't just let him go out and jump on any bike he chooses and just bugger off on it, because I've got the common sense and boundaries as a parent to enforce that. Obviously you can't rely on all parents to be responsible and have boundaries and discipline, or even experience to understand. You know, you might have a parent that just doesn't understand the implications of electric bikes. For that reason, I obviously do think there needs to be some kind of limit to an age of riding them. I also think worst case scenario, you should have something similar to the CBT, compulsory bike training. Perhaps you should have, you know, I think it might not be a bad idea that anyone with a CBT or full motorbike licence can automatically ride an e-bike up to 1000 watts, for example, without having to do anything else additional, because they're experienced, seasoned riders, and there shouldn't be an issue with them jumping on a bike that does, you know, not a ridiculous amount of speed. And speed, talking of which, you know, we've gone through average cyclist speeds. The majority of people that follow my channel and I talk to do have an issue with the 15 miles an hour speed limit, or the 15.5. You know, I think we shouldn't go crazy for it, because we've got to take into account inexperienced riders, etc, etc. But I think the law should maybe be raised to 20. I think the law should be raised somewhere between 22 and 24, 25 miles an hour. Somewhere in the low to mid 20 mile an hour range, somewhere between maybe 22 and 25 miles per hour would be a much more acceptable speed that people will be much happier with. If a greater speed limit is enforced, I do think that should be achievable on flat ground with pedalling or throttle. I don't think it makes any difference. If anything, I believe it makes it safer. I would love it if some of these big corporations and the government could keep their grubby little hands out of trying to monetize e-bikes up to about the limit that I've said, I think that is the best way to keep the people happy and to keep some sense of freedom for cycling. Cycling, motorbike riding, any bikes in general have always been about, to me, a sense of freedom, getting out and being more, you know, in touch with nature and the elements. It's one of the last freedoms that we still have, and I really strongly feel, and I know a lot of people strongly feel, that you don't want that kind of infringed upon by the government or any kind of organisation looking to sort of govern, restrict and make money out of something we enjoy doing. I do agree that there needs to be some guidelines in place, but I do feel like they can be updated and more kind of in line with what's more practical. I don't think when the laws were instigated they were done with any particular experts. It's given a rough guideline, but I think some of the things myself are a little bit skew with. Lastly, I think there's another couple of laws which need to be introduced for e-bikes. One is people need to stop lying about how fast their e-bikes go on social media. Just kidding. Also, I think e-bike manufacturers need to be governed somewhat by the stated range of their e-bikes, because they're absolutely ridiculous. Joking aside, if you want me to make a separate video about e-bike range and the reality of it, then let me know and I'll make a video on that. But yeah, let us know your thoughts on all this that I've spoke about today. Let me know your thoughts. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this little discussion today on e-bike law in the UK. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on it. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps grow my channel, and I'm doing some really cool projects at the moment, including the world's fastest electric mountain bike, which should be up and running pretty shortly. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this one, guys. I'll see you in the video soon. Take it easy.